of audiobooks of mine.
Ajay.
And my commentary on Shikshastakam is available on Audible and iTunes. Sham Kishori, one of the members of our paribar from a different sangha within the same paribar, has done a very professional job of that. And shortly, we'll have Joy of Self, which Mother Mohan herself and myself did the recording on. And Sham Kishore is now working on Aesthetic Vedanta. So Purnishta is going to make an announcement, perhaps on the Facebook group, more about that. So that's some good news. And with that, we can go and take the questions. I got a little sun coming in my face. I don't know if it's affecting the view, but it feels good to me. It will pass shortly, and I can see it's a little bit sunny there.
Oh, that's wonderful news. We look forward to that. It'd be nice Kartik absorption.
Yeah.
So the first question today is from Braj Sundari.
And Braj says, in one class from Brazil, you were explaining how the entry point for sadhakas in all rasas, except Madhurya, is the Brahma-vimohan-lila. And I am wondering why. It makes sense for Vatsalya ras, but how does it work for dasya and sakhya-ras?
Well, first of all, the entry point, if you will, the specific focus within the portal of the manifest or Prakat Lila for Madhurya Rasa is the Rasa Lila. And we find examples of that in that section drawn out in the commentaries. Certain gopis were unable to gain release from the chains of their family circumstances to meet with Krishna, and this caused the intensity of their separation, which is the low tide of the ocean of bhakti rasa to increase. And then later we find, I believe, maybe the 42nd chapter, I believe it's where gopis are speaking with Uddhava. It's apparent that those gopis were then successful in meeting with Krishna at a later date. So that is perhaps a well-known portal. And but the Brahma-vimohan-lila is, of course, it's centered on sakhya-rasa, but it also very much caters to Vatsalya rasa, because Krishna became the calves and the cowherd boys and all the mothers, the fathers, the elders in Vatsalya rasa had Krishna as their son, the cows, Krishna as their calf, and so forth. So I believe Goswami brings this out in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the section in Anuragana Vasatana Bhakti. And of course, as I say, Sakhya Rasa is central there. So the question is about Dasya Rasa. But the Dasya Rasa, as I've often mentioned in Braj, is not entirely, but almost exclusively tinged with Sakhya. And even some of the friends of Krishna whose love is purely in dasya may go with him, carry his shoes and so forth, for cowherding leelas. So they're tied in with the others considerably. If we look and see also how Krishna's dealt with the pending, with the separation that the devotees in Dasya and in Madhurya and Vatsalya were feeling from him, when he and his friends were in Mathura, and he spoke to his friends on how to to pacify their pangs of separation by delivering messages and so on and so forth. Krishna largely included the servants along with the cowherd boys. So I would look at it like that. I've said many times that there are three basic aesthetic centers to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam: the Vatsalya center, the Sakhya-rati center, and the Madhurya-rati center, consisting of a number of chapters. Vatsalya-rati centered around the Damodar-lila, a chapter on either side or so of that, and the Brahma-vimohan-lila, and its chapters for Sakhya-rati, and of course the 5 chapters of the Ras Panchadhyay, Rasa-lila. Those chapters for Madhurya, these are the centers. You might ask, where's the dasya center? It's kind of included in all of it, and all of these are really properly understood expressions of dasya, intensities of dasya in one sense. That's beautifully brought out in the 6th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Advaita charge is glorified. So, and I would also say that Sambandhanuga and Kamanuga are the 2 types. Sambandhanuga of Rag Bhakti, Sambandhanuga includes dasya, sakhya, and vatsalya. And Kamanuga, of course, is Madhurya, all of its varieties. And so that which is a suitable entry place for other sentiments, dasya, sakhya, and vatsalya, in within Sambandhanuga, a suitable place for entry, would serve the same purpose for those in dasya rasa. You have to, of course, I mentioned before, the dasya rasa brush is different than the dasya rasa of Vaikuntha. They're household servants largely. So there's a fair, considerable intimacy compared to dasya rasa in Vaikuntha. And it's a curious question. I'll say this: it's a curious question, but our real focus is the windows that our Gaudiya sampradaya most prominently afford us through which to enter, and that is Sakhya-rasa and Madhurya-rasa, given that the samasti gurus, the macrocosmic gurus of the sampradaya are Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there you have dasya Sakhya and Madhurya. So that should be our focus. Dasya rasa Braj is not my particular focus. So maybe someone could say more about that, although I've never met anyone of that particular bhav. So, of course, I should say, and I had before, any rasa is affordable through Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Swami Call, and all forms of the Godhead are present within Swami Call. But these two are prominent, and we're attracted to Gaudiya Vaishnavism largely because we have a svabhava that corresponds with those windows of opportunity. So, next question.
Next question is from. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Raj.
I just wanted to add that I guess what confused me, like, it starts with picnic lunch, where obviously it's like entry point for the devotees in Sakhya-rasa, but then all the boys are stolen. So I guess that what confused me, like, how do you enter that? Thank you very much.
For Sakhya-rasa. Yeah, it's all right to get stolen. The fact of the matter is, if you read in Circle of Friends, the boys were not stolen. There was only an appearance of their being stolen. and Mayic forms were manifest for Brahma to steal, whereas the Lila continued in a prakash that was not accessible, a window that was not accessible to Brahma. And so the picnic went on for a long time, for a whole year. Meanwhile, Krishna came back and manifested the cowherd voice and conducted himself in another prakash differently throughout the year. So if you're in the picnic, then you'll stay in that prakash. You won't be stolen. Prabhupada wanted to enter that picnic. He repeatedly expressed he just wanted to go and picnic and eat kachoris with Krishna in the forest. That was his kachori mukhi, as he was called in his youth. That was his aspiration. All right, what else?
The next question is from Ananta Govinda.
Ananta Govinda says, Dear Maharaj, in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says that he instructed it to the sun god and explains the principle of disciplic succession. We do not see the sun sampradaya as one of the 4 established Vaishnava sampradayas. Do we know why? Thank you.
Well, the sun is often employed as metaphorically to represent God, much as we're dependent upon in so many respects. And Surya is often referred to as Surya Narayan also. So a couple of thoughts about the sun. There's a fellow named Rupert Sheldrake. You may know of him. He's a scientist, been around for quite some time. And he's a bit of a scientific heretic, if you will. And he, in that he looks at consciousness much differently than the mainstream materialism and so forth. He's been talking about it for decades, since the time that I was writing Swami Call magazine. Some of you will remember those days. I recently saw a video of his where he talked about the sun being conscious, just as something, as an aside. He made a presentation of how it could be understood if we look at consciousness from a panpsychic point of view and so on and so forth. So without going into detail about that, and I didn't look at the whole video, but that said, I don't think that we need to look at it in the way that you're looking at that. Krishna is basically saying that that this knowledge is old. It's been around forever, and it's always good, even if it seems to be watered down. I again strengthen it, and so forth. So I don't think he's speaking there, about a particular, Vaishnava sampradaya that has been established. It is, I see your point. It's an interesting, thought, because obviously Krishna speaks to Brahma. There's the Brahma sampradaya, if you will. The Kumaras are spoken to by Sankarshan. There's the Kumara sampradaya, Nimbarka sampradaya, and so forth. The origins of the Sri sampradaya and the what's the other one? Lakshmi sampradaya. I don't know if we have a history on that from a mytho-historical perspective. We obviously have the historical figures as they're understood in Madhva, Nimbarka, and Ramanuja, and so on and so forth. But in the mytho-historical area, it becomes a little more blurred. Whereas we can give precise explanation or history of the beginning as I have with regard to Brahma Sampradaya or or the Kumara sampradaya. But Krishna can speak to the sun god. The sun god can speak to Manu, and they may not have any disciples themselves. We don't consider Manu to be one of the founders of the Vaishnava Sampradaya. Also may be looked at a little bit differently in that the section, this is in the 4th chapter, so it's titled Gyan Yoga. Obviously the whole yoga treatise beginning at the middle of the 2nd chapter and ending in the 6th is ultimately in an underlying or overarching sense about bhakti, begins with bhakti, ends with bhakti, and so forth. Still, he speaks about karma yoga and Gyan yoga and so forth. And that's the beginning of the teaching there. So you could say it in that way. He taught it in a particular way, which is different than from, same but different in terms of how he speaks to Arjuna there. Bhaktosi me sakajeti rahasya eta uttamam. He's revealing something more, I would say, there. But in a general way, in a broad way, he spoke to the sun god. Sun god spoke to him. I guess you could say he's establishing a principle also that should be handed down from teacher and so forth and so on. But no, we don't have a Surya sampradaya, although Surya plays a role in the birth chart of Radharani, so she's a worshiper of the sun god, especially on Sundays. So those are my thoughts about it.
So Ananta Govinda, he said that he also learned that Surya Siddhanta is Surya instructing Mayadhanava on cosmology, so that also confused him.
Surya Siddhanta. Those astrological texts are a later development from the Puranic cosmology, and there's some difference between that. It, in one sense, serves to illustrate the relativity of cosmological perspectives over time. I think the traditionalists in India tried to harmonize these newer findings from the Siddhanta, Surya Siddhanta, etc., that body of astronomical literature texts with the Puranas. And they weren't so successful. And then they were met with the Copernican revolution also from Europe, and it was difficult to harmonize it. So all this speaks about the relativity of cosmology, even as it stands today. It's very relative what you're going to find. Now there's a comet coming through the universe from another galaxy or something like that. You know about it? I saw an article about it, and it's very peculiar. It's for example, it's shooting out water like a fire hose. I don't know, it has to urinate or something like that, which would be odd for a rock. But the fact that it actually has water, which means life, and it's coming from another galaxy. It's an interesting thing. Some people say it's an alien spaceship. Anyway, it's on its way to Earth. You can look it up. It's making its way. And has many peculiarities to it that have never been seen with regard to other meteors. So some people are speculating it's not a meteor. Even some educated people in the field and so forth. I plan it safely, but even what I'm saying is even modern cosmology is fully open to revealing the skies, if you will, are willing to revealing something about themselves that nobody knew before, and that changes what they thought about it previously and so forth. So I like to look at this kind of thing as material nature showing itself over time in different ways. And it's mutable kind of nature. There are thought to be fixed scientific laws and so forth. And, to a large extent, there's some truth to that, but does it pertain to the entirety of the universe? Are there other universes? Would it pertain there? And, and so on and so forth. So it's a relative subject. And when a text like the Bhagavad or other Puranas, which differ from one another in some details with regard to cosmology, speak, you have to look at these texts in context and realize what they're really talking about is the fact that the world is mutable and constantly undergoing change, and it's here today and gone tomorrow, and the underlying ground of being that we're constituted of, consciousness, that's what is important. The inner trajectory, the inner landscape is what is important, not the outer landscape. That there's some difference between the Siddhanta text and the Puranas. So, it's a different time. I don't think that we look at Surya Siddhanta as you look at the Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad-Gita, as far as an authoritative scriptural text that we take, very seriously. The relativity of much of this literature is brought out, even with regard to the Puranas, by Jiva Goswami in Tattva Sandarbha, in the Pramana Kanda, where he speaks about, exploring epistemology and how we know what we know, and he rests ultimately with Bhagavatam being the most authoritative text in terms of revealing subjects that could not be known otherwise, subjects to things about the self and its prospect and God and so forth. But in the context of doing that, he relegates, some Puranas to the Sattva guna, some to the Rajaguna, Tamaguna. Obviously, they don't serve as pramanas or evidence. Just because you cite something from the Shiva Purana, or this Devi Purana even, which he doesn't appreciate very much there at Tattva Sandarbha for different reasons. When we look for scriptural praman or evidence, we're looking in the context of what we're doing, what our particular path is, bhakti. So what will be a praman or evidence for the karma marg or the gyan marg? It may be different texts and so forth. So there's some relativity to these texts, and I would look at whatever the I suppose meditative experience of somebody with regard to Surya Siddhanta was. This is material knowledge. So it's said with regard to Maya Danava, who I think you mentioned, it's said that he offered, Arjuna saved him from forest fire, and he offered him as a result the benediction of yantra vigyan, knowledge of machines, and Krishna intervened and said, don't take it, it's meant for Kali Yuga. Technology, so don't get too caught up in that technology. But so different characters, demonic characters, they have a lot of knowledge, and even in our present day we see that where demonic otherwise figures can be smart in certain fields and manifest almost magically certain things that weren't thought ever to be possible before, that we could be having this conversation over distances and viewing one another's images and so on and so forth, for example. So I wouldn't take Surya Siddhanta as a serious spiritual promotion. I hope that helps.
Sure. And then Sajjan also has a follow-up for this one.
Okay.
Dandavats Maharaj. Just a couple of real quick things. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Uddhava Gita, it's presented there that the four Kumaras received their began their sampradaya from Hamsa Avatar, the swan avatar of Lord Narayan. It said that's where that sampradaya came from.
Well, that's interesting. I don't remember that. Thank you for reminding me. But I believe it's in the fourth canto. They are taught the Bhagavatam by Sankarshan.
Oh, right, yeah, there too.
That's what I was referring to.
Oh,
so different histories.
Yes, two very fine spiritual teachers there. And the other thing is, it came to me that you mentioned other universes. Perhaps there could be a Surya lineage coming from the sun god in another universe, perhaps.
Why not?
Yeah.
We have to go there to find out, but that would be a distraction. So, okay, thank you.
Also, Maharaj, I just came to me that day after tomorrow is Srila Sridhar Maharaj's appearance day.
Yes.
Perhaps if there's some time later today, you could mention a little something if you like, if it comes naturally like that.
Okay, yeah. I've been writing about Prabhupada recently because I wrote a Prabhupada Astakam, and now I'm writing the commentary. I just finished the 5th verse last night, and many comments from Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj are coming to mind, some of which I've cited there. And now I'm just going in. The verses are given in, they give a kind of a chronology, in a broad sense. Prabhupada was born, Prabhupada got initiated, Prabhupada got on the boat, Prabhupada preached, did an amazing campaign in America. Now, in the 6th verse, he's just returning back to India with his, as he referred to them, white elephants. So he had about 30 students, where in about 1970, he began in earnest his preaching in India, seeking to acquire property in Mayapur and property in Bombay and so forth. And so Sridhar Maharaj, during that time, Sridhar Maharaj invited him to, earlier to that, he was in India earlier, but the first time he went back, Sridhar Maharaj hosted him for Kartik. Invited him to come for the month of Kartik. Came with a couple of disciples, and he set up a whole house for them and everything. So my takeaway from it is just we're just so blessed to be in such a lineage with Prabhupada and his super extraordinary, campaign and the person that he was. I mean, he was the Jagat Guru in a real sense of the term, because he was going all over the world on the one sense, and the other side of it was he had good character, excellent character. Even his critics could not criticize his character, his self-control, and so on and so forth. And Sridhar Maharaj, when he saw him for the first time when he came back from India, he was like, "Whoa, he's glowing," There's something different about him, and so forth. And he really put very squarely, of course, he analyzed very, very deeply, theologically, come to the conclusion that Nityananda Prabhu's power in Prabhupada, and began to cite the parallels. So I'm in the midst of that. So this Friday, Wednesday is an important day. We're very fortunate to be connected with Prabhupada, and as really fortunate to be associated with in a lineage coming from Guru Maharaj, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. I compared them to like the sun and the moon. Prabhupada's campaign was very bright, brilliant, lit up the whole world, so much that he overshadowed all over by even Gaudiya Vaishnava, personalities who were in their own right spiritually very, very qualitative and superlative devotees they were. But after his passing, then Sridhar Maharaj acted like the light of the reflective moon to soothe us with his teaching and association. And what a better, Siksha Guru for followers of Prabhupada, who the whole world is, whether they know it or not. It's a fact. All the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in the international community got their faith from Prabhupada's campaign, from our Parivar, from Bhakti Guru Parivar. So, the Govinda Maharaj used to say, these are our Rupa and our Raghunath, Prabhupada and Sridhar Maharaj. Such a capable, fit for a Siksha Guru who knew Prabhupada personally, who lived with him, who lived in Prabhupada's rooms. They wrote their Gitas together at the same time, commentaries at the same time, and so forth, discussing with one another. And Prabhupada, of course, opened the door, for us to have his shelter and guidance in Prabhupada's absence. So, I mean, it's just, the more you think about it and write about it, it's just like, why isn't everybody doing this? We should try to convince them this was a good idea, and it still is. This is how the succession has gone, if you will, from Prabhupada. To use Sridhar Maharaj's example, zigzag. It's really zigzag. It's going like this, and it's going back like that. From Bhakti Siddhanta to Prabhupada, back to Sridhar Maharaj, and back to humble persons like myself, by their grace. Pujapad Bhakti Sridhara-Deva Goswami Maharaja ki jai.
All right. Thank you, Maharaj.
It's coming up on the 15th. Okay, what else?
The next question is from Krishna Kanaya.
And Krishna Kanaya is asking, besides the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, are there more biographies of Krishna? And she just wants to clarify, she doesn't mean Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but biographies of Krishna. Thank you.
Well, in the Vishnu Purana, Padma Purana, you're going to find retelling of the Leelas of Krishna. They're not as detailed, and they're not focused on the rasa of the history, rasa of the Leela, like the Bhagavatam. Amongst such books, the Harivamsa Purana. Harivamsa means the family of Hari. Harivamsa Purana probably goes into more detail than Padma Purana, Vishnu Purana. But again, they're not Nigama Kalpataro Galitam Palam Shukamukaram Tarava Sambitam Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Rasika Bhag. They're not focused on the rasa of the history. You can tell a story, but what are the feelings to bring out the story, bring out the feeling, the emotions of the moment. This is what the Bhagavatam does, which then, and by so doing, affords us, an opening, excuse me, to enter into those feelings, to get exposure to them, and see if they correspond with our svabhav. And of course, as they do, then they open up that much more of a window for us. So there's nothing that compares to the Bhagavatam with regard to the story, the history of Krishna's Bhagavad-Gita.
Gayatri also mentioned Govinda Lilamrita.
Well, Govinda Lilamrita is it's good that you mentioned, but it's a different type of text because it speaks about a typical day in the life of Krishna. There's another book similar, Krishna Bhavanamrita of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and then Kavi Karnapur has written a similar book, I forget the name, which are like focuses on a particular day in the life of Krishna. So they're looked at more from the apricot perspective. It's super important and valuable, obviously, and therefore you can find, for example, in Circle of Friends, that I did a chapter on the Prakat Leela, and then I retold Leelas from the Bhagavatam from a sakhya-rati perspective. And then I did a chapter on the apricot lila, and then I retold from the Amrita, from the sakhya-rati perspective, a typical day in the life of Krishna. So that's the difference between the two. But yeah, it is about the life of Krishna, which fortunately has no end. So otherwise, yeah, I think there's another book now that's coming to mind. It's a simple in language and accessible to those who know it, the common people in Bengal. There's a book, Unaraj Khan, I believe, wrote a book that Prabhupada mentions that's very sweet. So there may be local, retellings of Krishna, but they're all based on Krishna, based on the Bhagavatam.
Uddhava has a follow-up for this one too, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
I was wondering, the Bhagavatam by itself, is very sweet and has all the depth, or is due to all the commentaries on the Goswamis and our sampradaya that we can truly access, to the Bhagavatam is really about?
Well, of course, the Bhagavatam is very sweet, as it says itself. But when our commentators speak on it, it becomes more sweetened. It brings out some details. It said, Vyasa Vetina Vetiva. Vyasa wrote the Bhagavatam. He may know the meaning, he may not know the meaning. But the Goswamis, I'll say it like this, they know the meaning because they're participants in the Leela. You understand? It's being retold. So they could say, well, here's a detail here. Something like that. So, yeah, the commentaries are more important to us than the text itself. But we cannot have the commentaries without the text. So they will give emphasis to the text. We will give emphasis to the commentaries.
Yeah, I was asking, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he read the Bhagavatam directly, he was not maybe so attracted until he read the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Well, yeah, I don't know if Bhaktivinoda really studied the Bhagavatam prior to that, but there were perceptions and misconceptions about the Bhagavatam that were prominent. After all, the British were extolling, the virtues of the Victorian moral perspective, and the Bhagavatam seems to be like the antithesis of that. The protagonist, Krishna, is a playboy, and so they dismissed it altogether. And so this is how the Bhagavad was being looked at. I think that Bhaktivinoda got exposure to that. On reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, then he had a different perspective, which then caused him to really explore the Bhagavatam. So I don't know that he explored it prior to that and reached that kind of Victorian misconception. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but he was brought up with the idea that this book is not serious. Even Hindus were saying, okay, Krishna the Bhagavad-Gita, we'll stick with that. Krishna the Bhagavatam, that's probably some interpolation or something like that. Here he's speaking the Upanishadic truth, and he's obviously a hero, and so on and so forth. And the Bhagavatam, we don't know what to do with that. But again, I think that that those ideas come from the British. I don't think the Indian population didn't think that about the Bhagavatam prior to the British, and they were reading the Bhagavatam. Right? And there were so many commentaries on the Bhagavatam prior to the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis. I think there's 80, 90, or 100 different commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And Srila Swami's commentary and so on and so forth. So they weren't under that misconception. But the British influence, for 200 years on India. By the time that Bhaktivinoda's talking about it was about 150. It was in the last 40, 50 years of the British rule. and capital of their, the jewel of their empire was thought to be Calcutta. And so they had a perspective on the Bhagavatam that was then prominent, that caused even religious people to have doubts in it, that previous to the British. Just reading the Bhagavatam, you wouldn't necessarily have those doubts, but if you had these British Victorian, sensibilities and so forth, which is all very interesting as well. You can look at the Indian temples, and they have a different view on sexuality than the Victorian perspective. To be sure, the iconography and so on, most of which shocked the British and caused them to think ill of the Hindus. But it was the British that were sexually uptight, and they made Indians sexually uptight, unfortunately, today. So they're not gotta get over that. They should read the Bhagavatam. All right.
So the next question is from Satchidananda.
Yes, and he asks, he would like to know if the more advanced the devotee is, the less he cares about the adhikara of other devotees. Does that make sense? Thank you, Maharaj.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean when you say less he cares about the adhikara. Because if he is going to preach, then he has to take into consideration the adhikara in terms of how to preach to them effectively, share the teachings with them. That's one thought. Of course, the other thought is that the Madhyamadhikari realization is characterized in the Bhagavatam as being well aware of the adhikara, right? That's, discriminating between those who are less advanced, those who are more advanced, and how to relate to the two sides, and then to those who are inimical, how to relate to them. So discrimination is kind of the hallmark of the intermediate class of devotees, whereas the Uttamadhikari is when in an Uttam stage of consciousness, then you could say adhikar would not have much be much of a factor. There's a lack of discrimination on the part of the neophyte, the kanishta, and there's an absence of discrimination on the part of the uttam. And the madhyam, the intermediate, is characterized by discrimination. That discrimination takes us away from a lack of required discrimination that the neophyte is subject to. The classic example, of course, of the neophyte is he cannot distinguish between the importance of the devotee and the importance of the deity, and might, for example, come into the temple where the lecture is going on, walk past it, ignore it, stand in front of the deity, say some prayer, put a coin in the box, and walk out. Krishna is actually more present in the speaking of that devotee's Bhagavad discourse than he is in the form of the deity, and he's taking pleasure, and the deity is taking pleasure in the talk himself. So this is an example of the lack of discrimination that gets in the way of his progress. So the discrimination proper discrimination takes us from the Kanishta-adhikari to the Madhyam, and then from the Madhyam perspective to enter into the Uttamadhikari, I can say not a lack of discrimination, but an absence of discrimination. He sees someone offers him some food, he takes it as prasad. Krishna is giving me prasad. How merciful he is. He is characterized in the Bhagavatam as seeing everything according to Krishna's plan, everything in relation to Krishna. So, in this consciousness, one can't preach. So we could find Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go into Uttamadhikari consciousness. He couldn't preach. He would come out of that to some extent, and then be able to discriminate and preach. So, in one sense, yes, more one becomes advanced, the less adhikara makes has any concern, but not entirely, because I say it is the hallmark of the intermediate devotee. Proper discrimination that has to be taken into consideration. But then again, I don't entirely know what you mean when you say less adhikara, becomes a concern. I mean, you could be thinking, well, the more he becomes advanced, the more he's prepared to give Krishna consciousness to anybody and everybody, regardless of their adhikara. Now, that might be your thought. Mm-hmm. And you could perhaps say that, but then he might meet with their adhikara and realize, oops, it's a little over his head, so I have to adjust accordingly. So without further clarification, that's about as far as I can answer your question, and I do appreciate it.
He's not on the call today, Guru Maharaj, but Guru Nishta has a follow-up for the question.
Okay.
Guru Maharaj, I was wondering, normally it's said that the Kanishta adhikara is characterized by lack of discrimination, but would it be also accurate to say that they're also characterized by faulty discrimination? Because they can be more weak and make like really bad decisions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, if he lacks discrimination, that means he discriminates, doesn't have the proper discrimination. So it's kind of a way of saying the same thing. You're saying the same thing with different words. If you lack discrimination, then you don't discriminate properly, and so you make errors in that regard. Yeah, discrimination is the function of the intellect, right? And buddhi. So it plays a prominent role in our making progress as we spiritualize our intellect. Then it guides us in our practice and helps us to avoid succumbing to the call of the senses and the mind. And when that type of discrimination is really in place in our life, then we can progress to ruchi. There are also discrimination in ruchi as well, but it's different. There, the practice is driven by the taste more so than by the intellect. But discrimination is, like I say, it's a function of the intellect, and it's important for our progress to spiritualize it and discriminate properly who to associate with, how, when, what's favorable for bhakti, what's not, and so on and so forth. What else?
The next question is from Rama Kali.
And
Ram Kali.
in Bulgaria, she says, "My loving obeisances, Guru Maharaj."
Hare Krishna. Pranam to your daughters also.
Is it correct to see our humanity with all its weaknesses, fear, anxiety, desire for control, and attraction to sense enjoyment, as what makes us small and needy of Krishna, and internally to accept this smallness of the false ego, allowing it to become fuel for more sadhana and dependence upon Krishna? Of course, this acceptance is internal, only to allow further growth. It does not mean we will allow it to take over our lives externally. Thank you.
If I understand your question properly, it is basically asking if our humanity, with all of its weaknesses, is not an advantage or a qualification or something that serves our spiritual interest, because if it's well enough thought out, it drives us to take shelter of a solution that we could not arrive at to the problem of life unto ourselves. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, and there's very much truth to that. That's why it's said, for example, that Bharata, Varsha, or in a broader sense, the human form of life is the place for making spiritual advancements, as opposed to a hellish life or a heavenly life even. You might think, well, heavenly life is more conducive, but it's not. They're the type of problems, the anxieties, the fragileness of humanity, our weakness and so forth. We don't find that in the heavenly planets. So they're thinking they're all right. They don't need, and there's not as much urgency. One time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said he gave a curse to good health because he thought, in good health, I'm thinking I don't need Krishna. We find Mother Kunti Devi, Krishna's aunt, praying in the Bhagavatam. All those times when we were so much troubled by different events, which is, of course, part of human life. It's not part of the Deva's life, right? We could not. We were blessed by them because it gave us negative impetus to think of Krishna, by which all problems can be solved, by which birth and death can be conquered, and so forth. So I think it's a very beautiful way to look at our human life, our frailness, our weakness. Krishna, is a lover, and arguably his prakat lila, his manifest lila, is more full than his aprakat lila, because as I've often portrayed it, it's like a movie filmed on location, which means that the human life, love is a weakness. Love itself is a weakness, right? That there's nothing stronger than the weakness of love. So his capacity to function, carry on as a lover, to pursue love, is facilitated by human life. So I really like the way you've thought about it, if I've understood it correctly. So thank you for that. What else?
The next question is from Vishnu. If you want to unmute yourself, Vishnu.
Dandavats, Maharaj, thank you. Now it's
Yes.
Kartik Vrat, and we sing the Damodarastakam prayer every day. The way I see it, with my limited understanding, it's a progression. In the first line, Satyavrat Muni, he lays down the Mangalacharya, if you will, and then he dives into the Leela. He mentions the first Angi of the Lord's beauty, and then he talks about Bal Gopal and then he mentions Mother Jasoda repeating, kissing his face. And finally, in the last verse, reserved for his obeisances to Srimati Radhika, he mentions the rope. Indeed, he calls it like an abode of effulgence. Why is offering obeisances there? Why is mentioning the rope then? What is the deeper meaning of it being an abode of effulgence?
Well, you're right that Sanatana Goswami wrote a commentary on the Damodarastakam. You may be familiar with that. So those of you who are interested can look that up. It's been published in different places, and I think he does look at it as like verses were written yuga after yuga after yuga after yuga, long time coming to the end, which culminates in the glorification of Radharani. But as far as the rope goes, well, the rope is all I could say is it's very central to the Damodar-lila, right? Taking Gopal Champu, Jiva Goswami he very beautifully depicts the Lila, depicts that the Damodar-lila there, but he has Yashoda drawing on the ribbon from her hair in flight, try to catch Krishna and tie him. And the ribbon is 2 inches too short. So the neighboring ladies who previously complained about Krishna coming and stealing butter and milk, and which Mother Yasoda was in denial about,
Yes.
but knew was true, and therefore chastised her husband. What kind of cowherd king are you, that your son has to go to other people's houses and steal, and I have to hear this from them, their milk? And so Nanda took special cows, put them on special grasses, and that was the milk that she was boiling on the stove for Krishna. and put him down so that it would not overflow, to which he complained, and so on and so forth. And so when she's seeking to tie him up, all those village ladies are looking over the wall, going, there. And then to help her, they throw the ropes, of course. And cowherds have unlimited rope because you need rope to milk cows and herd cows and so on and so forth. So again, every time she tied more rope to the ribbon, it still remained 2 inches too short. So one of the things, and I mentioned this before, that this Leela points out is a deep philosophical truth, which is Bheda, because Krishna's, everything is in, no matter how big the rope is, Krishna cannot be encircled by it. And he's not getting fatter each time, right? He's staying the same size. And so, no matter, you can't capture him, you can't surround him in the world, he's beyond the world, but he's in the world. He's in the world right there as Yashodananda. But the whole world is but he's beyond the world at the same time. This is a panentheistic perspective, Bheda. So this is the deep philosophical truth that comes out. This is a kind of Leela that Mahaprabhu would base his idea on, because there's a debate about unity and difference. Some scriptures, some statements from the Upanishads speak about oneness of Jiva with Brahman. Some speak about difference. Which is it? So everybody's trying to navigate this course between these two different perspectives. Some say sometimes different, sometimes one, sometimes only one, and the differences are relative, and some say only union is relative, and differences are prominent, and so forth. Mahaprabhu said, stop thinking about it. Just look at the Leela and you'll see it's both at the same time, conceivably. And this would be an example of that. So, despite the evolution in bhava that the verses are representing, this is the tattva that underlies it. And bhava arises out of tattva, right? And so for that reason, he may be paying his obeisances to the rope and its effulgence, the light of the tattva that puts the whole human-like Leela in perspective and makes us understand the importance of the word like and human equal. Human-like. He's human-like, means he's human, but he's not human. He's completely transcendental and so forth. So I kind of look at the rope like that in one sense. And of course, the other sense, it represents the affection of Mother Yasoda. And because she's tying him up, not as much to chastise him as she is out of fear that he's going to run away. Then what would be the case? So those are some thoughts on that. Hope it helps. Dambar Leela ki jai.
So, would you like to take any more questions, Guru Maharaj? It's 12:30 at the moment.
Take one more.
Take one more. So there's another question from Braj Sundari.
And she says, in his commentaries to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse 41, and 1:344, Srila Prabhupada says, Srimad Bhagavatam should therefore be received from the representative of Shukdev, who must be in the renounced order of life without family encumbrance. And then another quote, no one can learn Srimad Bhagavatam who is associated with persons engaged in sex life. He was partially referring to professional Bhagavatam reciters, but these particular statements seem to exclude anyone who has family life. Meanwhile, even Vyas himself was married. how to understand these statements and how to explain them to others. Thank you.
Well, Prabhupada was clear in his preaching overall that the sannyas, for example, in his institution, which was an order created by Bhaktisiddhanta, was a formality, and for the purpose of preaching, which is the case of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sannyas also. It was a formality, it was a preaching strategy on behalf of Bhaktisiddhanta, and it was very effective. We're largely here because of that. But he was very clear that that this formality, an official status, if you will, of a sannyasi or a renunciate, is not required. But the spirit of that is required. And that can be in place in household life as well, such as the virtue and the power of bhakti. So if you zoom out and look at that statement in regard to other things that he said, it's very clear that it's the spirit of renunciation, turning away from acquisition and so on and so forth. And it may even be the case. Prabhupada had also a term, brahmachari grihastas. Brahmachari grihastas, who would be grihastas, but they wouldn't have children, and they were conducting themselves in all respects with the guru's instructions, who might even tell them to have a child, and then they would have a child, something like that. So it's if you look at the more the entirety of his teaching, you find the emphasis on the spirit, and Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janiyati Ashubhayam Gyanam Chayavaitikam. So as one advances in bhakti, then renunciation and knowledge should be a byproduct of that. They're not the goal, and they're not the ways to cultivate them directly, but cultivate bhakti. These things come about, so they should come about in advanced devotees. But they can be in any position. They can be a woman, they can be a man, they can be married, they could be a 16-year-old boy, like Sukadev. So all right, we'll stop with that. Don't forget to remember Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj's birthday. We thank Sajjan for reminding us all. And look for those audio books. Now you can listen to Shikshastakam, which, I read that. Don't think like that. Let's do it again. You think I missed that part, right? That's really good for all of you. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Haribo. Sri Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
So so we got quite a few questions still. It's always wonderful. Everybody's enthusiastic for the guitar. So you'll be first, as you know, those in order as we receive them. And have a lovely Kartik and absorption.
If anyone has any more coming
and if anyone has any more, send them on. Or let us know if you'd like to ask yourself also. Okay, take care. Have a nice week. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.